Hello and welcome to this episode of Al's Garage. Today we're continuing work on our 1943 Willys MB and we are tackling the gas tank. Now this is a video that I didn't really plan on making because I've already done a lot of the process, so I'll explain that here and then we'll finish up. But I just figured it'd be worth at least sharing some of what I've learned along the way. The inside of the gas tank is really important if you have an old motorcycle or a car that's been sitting a long time. I'm not even talking about if it's rusted out or anything like that, but because there's processes around that too. But what had happened with this gas tank is that it was replaced about 5 years ago. It had gas in it, and the gas had just sat for a number of years, I'd say, 4, 5, 6 years, something like that. So it was half full of gas that was just really thick, and we didn't want that in there. So it's important that the gas tank that you're working with when you get a vehicle running, especially if you do a lot of work on the engine, if you rebuild an engine, I mean, this is step one of your fuel system, and it just needs to make sure that there's no particles or anything that's going to come off, head down the fuel line and end up in your carburetor, fuel filters. You don't want any of that getting gummed up, because that just, it's step one in why is this not running quite right? Well, maybe because it's not getting the full amount of fuel because of the gas tank, particulates and things like that. So with this tank, what we did, it had, like I said, the 4 or 5 year old gasoline. I pulled the plug, of which this has on it. I pulled that plug and I got the gasoline out of the tank, drained it, disposed of it properly per my local EPA regulations and all that stuff. So I was able to get that all removed, disposed of, and that left me with a gas tank that had sludge in the bottom here, this part. So what I did at that time was I took lacquer thinner, and I took about a half a gallon of lacquer thinner and I dumped it in the bottom, and I had it sit like this, and I actually had it sit for about between 12 and 24 hours. Let it have enough time for it to do what it's supposed to do, which is kind of break up the, as a solvent, it breaks up the gasoline. Then from there I sloshed the tank around. I picked it up and sloshed it back and forth. Then I drained that. Then I ended up filling it again with another about half gallon of lacquer thinner. And then I sloshed it around the inside of the tank. And then I took the time to position the tank in certain areas, which ended up exposing the lacquer thinner to different faces. So for instance, I took it and I had it sit like this for about 3 or 4 hours, and then I had it sit with all of the fluid like this, where everything would sit in here for a few hours. Then I flipped it, and so on and so forth, so that all the surfaces that were affected with that old gas could get kind of reacted to and lifted. At each stage I flushed it with a hose and water, and so sometimes just having the lacquer, minimum amount of lacquer thinner I put in there wasn't enough. So I went in there with a hose, flushed it, shook the tank, let it drain, went in there, a hose again, really hit it with some water pressure with my hose nozzle where I could get it to, and so with each step I then drained that, and at that point I think we've got all of the gas out of here, and that's where we're at right now. However, if you're sitting there thinking, gosh, he filled it with a bunch of water, I wonder what happened next, and of course it flash rusted. So it has a little bit of flash rust. We're going to look at that here now, and from here I'm going to take a gallon of muriatic acid, and I will do the same step but with the muriatic acid. I'll pour that in here. I'll cut and actually show you what the tank looks like now here in a moment, but I'll then pour my gallon of muriatic acid in, and I'll do kind of the same process. I'll slosh it around, and then we will let it sit on each face for a little bit of time so that the acid has an opportunity to work in each area. Then from there, I will dispose of the acid properly, and then from there I have a gas tank that has the chemical reaction that has taken place with the muriatic acid. From there, I'm going to take this solvent, the lacquer thinner, and pour a bunch of lacquer thinner in there, and then slosh that around to break loose any muriatic acid that's sitting around. And then from there, I'm going to take some gasoline, which is kind of my final step, pour a little gasoline in there, slosh that around just to make sure that the lacquer thinner isn't sitting in there, any residual lacquer thinner. And from there we should have a clean inside of our tank to then put gasoline in and not have any worry that there's going to be any foreign chemicals or foreign particulates come down the fuel system into our carburetor or fuel filters or anything like that. So I will show you what the gas tank looks like right now. So here's the inside of our gas tank. Let me try to get it to focus properly here. Okay, you can see that, I'll try to tap the focus here on my iPhone. Yeah, so you can see at the bottom, there isn't much as far as chemicals or particulates, but as far as the rust goes, there is that layer of flash rust that has happened. Let me try to get my camera angle working here without the phone getting in the way. But you can see essentially the inside of the tank. Actually, the side looks pretty good, but the bottom has some of this little rust in here. So the muriatic acid should do the trick as far as getting our chemical reaction of our rust taken care of here. You can see there's a little bit happening on this edge here, and then let's see if I can get in here. Essentially, yeah, that's what we're looking at is that rust mostly happening within this tank. So we're gonna fill it with muriatic acid and shake it up and leave it sit for a little bit. All right, we're gonna put our muriatic acid in. Again, this is something that you can buy at like a Home Depot or any big home improvement type store, Lowe's probably. I put my drain plug back on, and again, if you have a different type of gas tank or vehicle, it just makes sure that you have everything sealed up so that when you pour it in, it's not going to start pouring out somewhere. So before I pour it in, I just want to say a note about safety. I have gloves on in the event it splashes back. It is obviously an acid. I also am wearing eye protection because I wouldn't want it to splash back. And I have my hose on and ready to go and sitting just off camera, so if something happens, I get it splashed on my arm, I can just hose off, and so we should be set as far as safety goes. One thing I notice is there's a little leakage here. I'm going to take some impervious to fuel Teflon tape, wrap that around the thread of this plug, and then from there it should hopefully hold it. For now, while I wrap this up, we'll leave it sit right here, and then we'll just continue to flip this over as needed over the next few hours. So I took this tank and I rotated it every 6 hours or so, on its end, on the other end, on each side. I even turned it and at least splashed it around on the top part here. So we should have this acid have coated the tank in multiple areas for a while now, which I think should have neutralized the rust that's been taking place. I didn't get it all filmed just because it ended up raining last night, and so it kind of messed up with the camera. But what I'm going to do now is take a peek inside and we'll see what the tank looks like. You can see with the light from my flashlight, my headlight, what we're looking at on the left hand side is the curve where I'm pointing the light in the gas tank. You can see that, and then the metal brace that keeps the gas from sloshing back and forth. Both of those, which are down near the bottom, seem to be nice and shiny metal, which is great. The more I look around this, obviously the entrance to this tank is a little rough, but I don't think that's going to transfer any gunk to the fluid. And obviously we got the muriatic acid there at the bottom. So things are looking good. And with that, what I'm going to do is pop that drain plug there at the bottom and drain all of my muriatic acid out. I'll do that for you guys here, and we're going to use a metal funnel and drain it back into the container here where it'll be disposed of properly. So let's get that done. And now you get to see me pour muriatic acid all over my driveway here. So we're back and we have all of the muriatic acid drained from the tank. I only spilled a little, but I was able to use my hose, as you saw, and get everything sprayed off. Next up, we are using lacquer thinner. I have about 2/3 of a gallon left, and so I'm going to take a third and then a third and do 2 rounds of pouring lacquer thinner in here, turning it around, sloshing it about, and getting that muriatic acid that's remaining in here loose and out of there. And then from there, I'll use this gasoline, and we'll do the same process so that the last thing running through this is clean gasoline rather than any other item, including water. Now, one of the things I didn't cover up until now is the fuel tank sending unit. Now, the sending unit, I'm not sure if it was good or not. It's an old unit, so my attitude was, hey, if we get it in and we get it together and it works, then it works. This sits pretty easy access, so if for some reason it doesn't work, then I'll just replace it. But one thing that you can do in whatever job you're doing, especially if you have a tank that has minimal access or hard access to get to something like your sending unit, another thing you can do is make a plate, like a little metal plate, and use some gasket sealer, obviously something that's somewhat impervious to fuel that might resist the acid. So make yourself a little plate that would stick over there, and that would be a way that you could, assuming if you have a working sending unit, that would keep it working and not expose it to any of these chemicals. So just a little tip there. But that's it. That's essentially the next process I'm going to do. We're going to close this video out with me doing some sanding on the gas tank. Doing that should pretty much close it out and pretty much make this ready to paint and put back in the vehicle. So excited about that, but I hope that you found this video useful. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day. See you next time.